achieve. So with that, Derek, I hope I didn't put you on the spot. If you wanted to take over and start through some of this, it'd be greatly appreciated.
Thanks, Mark. And I think I'm just going to take over the screen sharing from Jake, if that's all right.
Yeah, go for it. It looks fine now. How's that, Derek?
Yep, give me just 1 second here.
Thank you.
Can folks see that all right on the screen now?
We can, Derek.
All right, so as Mark had mentioned, in past years, North of Falcon meetings, as well as earlier in this year, we've presented this tool to solicit feedback on fishery shaping and priorities of the recreational community. The tool itself allows us to model targeted fishery actions in the real time and look at how those actions could affect kind of our management metrics. And we can signify in this tool taking an action by basically placing an X over here in this B column. And say if we were to do this one, this first one, and then what that would do is it would kind of represent the action that's over here in the A column. So in this specific instance, it would be reducing the summer quota in area 5 from 4,700 or 4,077 fish to 2,659 fish. Then what that changes is if we're looking kind of the primary metrics that we're monitoring and looking at in this tool are in these columns C and D. And you can see our column C is our total Puget Sound sport catch. Whereas in column D, we're really looking at the Stillaguamish stock, and column D is showing the total non-treaty stillyfish harvested in our current season proposals. So what I might say there on the stillyfish is as we're looking at things and we have a management objective there of 8% unmarked SUS and 12% marked SUS to get to those management objectives. I'm preliminarily looking at in the modeling that there will be approximately 123 or 124 fish to go around total to meet those management objectives. Of those 123 or 124 fish, in kind of recent years, we've been splitting those mortalities with the tribes at a 50-50 ratio. And so I calculate that if we were to have 123 or 124 available stilly mortalities, I calculate that we're going to want to target somewhere around 61 or 62 stilly mortalities. And as we were shaping our original package based off the March 16th meeting, you can see that our starting runs are producing 62 stilly mortalities. And so as we take our actions, as we put in our X's over here in column B, you can see how that affected the stilly mortalities. Now that we have an X in this first action, we can see that it's over here, that it's decreased stilly mortalities by 2. You can see our post-action ERs in these blue boxes. So you can see, of course, that we saw that change where if we took that action, we'd be at 60 total non-treaty stillyfish harvested. And you can also see, once again, what that does to our overall sport catch. Another metric that you might pay attention to is over here in this column G. So in this column G, what this represents is our Puget Sound sport catch per stilly impact. So this is one way of kind of thinking about how costly or not actions might be that we're taking. So when we have a green action or a green box over here in this column G, it's basically signifying that that you get a lot of catch per action taken, or you have to lose a lot of catch per stilly impact in the modeling. So you can see, and then red are ones that are kind of more expensive. One thing that we've highlighted in recent meetings is particularly area 7 in both the summer and the winter. We see being very costly, those seasons per stilly impact. So that's kind of highlighted there in that section. And you can kind of go and see throughout the tool on each of those actions. So if I could, maybe what I'll do is I'll just talk through some of the actions themselves and some of the things that we're looking at. We've kind of sorted it by marine area, going from area 5 down through area 10. over here, and looking at the potential actions that we could do and seeing their impacts on Stilly. So we've been trying to kind of model some of the things that we heard in the March 16th meeting. For example, I do remember that that Brett, as well as Pat Patillo, had talked about changing size limits. So you can see for all of our areas, that's something that we've incorporated into our look. Increasing size limit in the summer is what they talked about in the March 16th meeting. I do remember Norm Reinhardt had suggested perhaps lowering that winter size limit in all of our areas to 20 inches. So you can see, for example, that action there. We heard from some folks about closing Area 10 in January. That action signified here, as well as Mark had highlighted, kind of there was some desire to look at maybe lining up blackmouth seasons in multiple areas. So for that, what we've done is we've looked at kind of March in each of these areas in 6 through 9 and seeing the cost of March. You might notice that there are some kind of additional actions that we had already looked at that are still in here. For example, some of these in Area 7 or some of these in Area 9. Maybe just to talk through some of the ones in Area 9 particularly. Right now, our quota in Area 9 is in the summertime is 6,500 fish approximately. That is kind of the quota that we think we would need to run a full season based off recent years' effort. However, one consideration there is that last year's catch in Area 9 summer was 3,700 fish approximately. And so that's one area that we've been looking at. I guess what I would say is if we're trying to target this 62 stilly fish goal in our modeling, and if our current model runs without any actions, so let me take out this X, are at 62 fish. Essentially, if we're looking at some of these actions to add opportunity, it will require us to look at kind of some other actions in other areas that provide some decrease to the number of stilly mortalities. So that's a very, very brief overview of this tool. And I wanted to see if folks are looking at some of these options here and find them more appealing, and if we can kind of work together to build something. I just realized that I somehow got muted in the middle of my talk. I hope that I didn't ramble on for too long.
You're okay, Derek. We caught most of it.
Where did I stop, Mark?
Just like 10-15 seconds ago.
Okay, perfect. So I was just about to open it up to the floor to check in and see if we want to start looking at some of these actions and where we could potentially make those fishery shaping changes. And I do note that Carl Nyman's hand is up, so maybe we might start with him and see if he has any questions or comments.
Yeah, one big surprise for me right here. When we were looking at this tool, on a meeting here a few days ago, yeah, I recall that at the top there, the total stilly fish, we had some buffer there. It was at like 57 fish. We had like a 5-fish buffer, and now we're at the ceiling. What is the difference between the tool today and the tool you were using a few days ago?
Thanks, Carl. So there are kind of a few things that are different from the tool that we presented on March 16th. This once again represents kind of the seasons that we have in the modeling and our current modeling exercise. So one thing there was that we kind of some of those pre-action, some of those pre-run actions that we took, updating our effort to incorporate kind of recent information for this year was one thing that increased our totals by a small amount. However, kind of most of the, I would say that a good portion of that increase also came from our changes to Area 11. We had implemented Area 11 June and Area 11 in the winter, which kind of made up that gap. I think after updating the effort, I'd have to go back and check, but I think if I remember right, it put us at about 60 stilly fish. So that extra 2 fish came from Area 11 change.
Okay, well, this comment is kind of directed at the whole process here. When you have a conservation objective that, you know, a driving stock like this that affects everybody's ability to craft fisheries. And, you know, that, you know, 4 or 5 fish is a pretty significant amount. You know, you kind of, historically, you kind of feel like, you know, all areas, you know, 6 through 11 should have an opportunity to have considerations or discussions about how to use those impacts. And I understand, you know, area 11 has been kind of the short end of the stick lately, but, you know, for those impacts to mostly disappear going into, you know, crafting fisheries in one area, that doesn't feel like it's really gone through the fair consideration for all areas to consider, you know, how to use those impacts, or even the objectives requested by the public going into this process of, you know, getting some winter back in multiple areas. You know, we'll follow up on that later, but that's my first blush on this situation, on how this has affected this tool and how the fisheries are being modeled today.
So Derek, I might respond to that really quick, Carl. As you know, because you've been in this for a while, so you're familiar, more familiar than a lot of people, is the impacts are not distributed evenly amongst the marine areas, right? So as Derek said, any kind of fisheries changes or additions in different areas have much different impacts on Stillaguamish. I think what we were looking at is where could we add in opportunity or put opportunity back on the water and still maintain those Stillaguamish conservation concerns. You know, there's I don't think I have to hide it. There's division amongst our sport fishing and recreational community about where these impacts should be best used. There's strong opinions on both sides about providing balanced opportunity in the winter. There's also strong opinions that say we need to maintain as much summer opportunity because it provides the most diverse opportunity for the widest amount of people. I think that's why we're here today, is to consider everybody's opinions. You know, the state hasn't landed on a specific fishing package yet. We had a co-manager meeting yesterday where we reiterated our position that we still had a public process to go through, and that we would likely be coming back with fishery changes different than what we had on our previous run. So that's just my quick response, Carl. Thank you. So long pause, lots to take in as we're thinking about stuff. Derek, I wonder if it would be helpful to maybe put a scenario up on the screen where we could look at what we could do with, you know, for say, reduce an Area 9 summer quota, and what we could be able to do with winter fishing opportunity if we were to take some summertime actions.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I think that's a good idea here. So looking at Area 9, as it was one of the ones that we were highlighting, looking at the summertime, just due to the catch that we saw last year. If we were to change Area 9 summer quota so that it reflected last year's catch, it would afford us about 4 stillyfish. And you can see that that's reflected up here, where our 62 changes down to 57.6. So if we did that, then, and if we were looking at Area 9, for example, say if we wanted to add in February and March in Area 9, that's one potential option. And we can see what that does up here. It puts us slightly over the 62. So it would mean that we would have to shape somewhere in some other area. One example could be over here. Maybe you can get a little bit of wiggle from Area 10 in January in the winter period. So if we put that X in there, it puts us right at that 62 mark. So this is one example of how we could change our fishing proposals to potentially get opportunity in Area 9 winter. It would require a reduction of 1 month of fishing from area 10 in the winter, and it would require reducing that area 9 summer quota such that it would be more likely that the area 9 summer would close early. But that's one potential option. And you could also not just look at the stilly impacts, but you could see what that does to our catch as well. So it would overall be a catch decrease for our sport fisheries, but it might help to get opportunity in a place where we don't have at the moment is just one example of how we could use this tool. Carl?
Oh yeah, just one quick comment about, the total Puget Sound catch, the 30,024 fish. Those are harvested fish estimates?
That's right. That'll be that'll be across all of our Puget Sound marine areas, all of the sport catch harvest.
Okay.
Yeah, harvested.
So what I wanted to mention, another value in fishing opportunity is time on the water. So this could potentially be a little misleading, not deliberately, but so maybe you lose 1,000, 1,700 fish that you harvest, but do you perhaps add additional time on the water and opportunity to go fishing, which can result in economic advantage to many facets of the state's economy?
That's a really good point, Carl. And one thing that I would highlight is that in the March 16th meeting, I actually had those months reduced or gained by the actions over here in a different column. The reason why I didn't do it this time was just because it started to become confusing, with changing size limits. I guess what do you count that as a zero when you start talking about keeping the same season but reducing the quota to a certain point where it's likely that you'll have to close early. Do you count that as a reduction in time lost or whatnot? So that it wasn't intentional that I excluded it, other than, but it was, but the reason it was, I thought it'd be more confusing, but it is a really good point to be looking at and considering as we examine the tool.
I see Spencer has his hand up. Go ahead, Spencer.
Yeah, I joined a skosh late, but am I reading it correctly that per our questions about size limit, it looks like that gains us quite a few fish if we increase that to 24 or 26 across the board. Is that correct?
Well, I think it depends how you look at it, Spencer, in terms of what it gains us in Stillaguamish. So Derek, what maybe we could clear it out and do an exercise where we're flipping some of these summer areas to 24-inch size limit and see what kind of effect that has, just so folks have an idea.
Yeah, or even the 26, just because it's I mean, in the summer, keeping fish much smaller than that.
I think that's a really good idea, Mark, and I like the and I think it's good to have this information out there. So I appreciate the question and comment here, Spencer. The one thing before I go into that I wanted to mention, one thing that I was noticing is we don't get kind of an equal benefit from size limit changes across areas, and I'll highlight that as I'm going through this. In some areas, the benefit that we get to Stilly is really small. Sorry, I mixed up my words there. The benefit that we get to Stilly is really small. For example, over here in area 5, you can see that that to get almost no benefit to Stilly for changing to a 24-inch size limit, you'd be giving up a total catch of 344 fish. You can see this is one of those instances where there's a really high number of catch per Stilly impact gained by making that action. However, in some other areas, area 7 is a good example. We can see that we can see that increasing that size limit in area 7 has kind of a disproportionate effect on those Stilly impacts, where this change to the size limit has kind of a lesser change to the total catch, but also a pretty good benefit for Stilly. So I would just highlight that those actions aren't equal, and maybe they make more sense in some areas than others. But let's quickly go through and let's add in some X's to represent, as Spencer recommended, a 26-inch size limit. So,
and I'm specifically thinking about like area 7 and stuff, the area that's getting hit the hardest for closures or what have you, that winter and summer.
Yep. I'll just put it in 7 first, and we can see, of course, then that reduces our stilly impacts by 2.6 fish. So you can see what that does right there. Just for consistency, let's also do it in some of the other areas just to see kind of what the total benefit if we implemented it in more areas would be. Sorry, I'm just going to do this real fast so I don't have to keep on centering. It's bothering me. All right, so if we did it across all areas, we could see that our total benefit there is about 5 fish. So, and then you could see that it would change our total catch down by a little bit less than 3,000 fish. So, rather a little bit more than 3,000 fish. I'm sorry. So that would afford us potentially room elsewhere to then make some changes.
David has his hand up. Go ahead, David. You'll need to unmute yourself.
My question has to do with when you guys are modeling these increases in sizes, we already know there's encounters that count against the limit. How will you be factoring in the difference in encounters because you're having to sort through more fish to get to the limited size?
Did you catch that, Derek?
I did, and you broke up a little bit, David, but I think I got it all. One thing I should mention about how modeling size limit changes is there's kind of 2 different ways in which we could go about that. One way in which we could do that is we hold the effort stable, and by holding the effort stable, you're having the same number of total encounters in the fishery. And in that regard, as you increase the size limit, you're lowering the catch because you're keeping the effort the same. Another way that we could look at it is we could say that we keep the quota the same. And if we were to keep the quota the same, what it would represent is that it would take more effort to get to the number of total catch. And I think that's what you're speaking to here, David. The way that I've chosen to model it, and it's kind of described here in the comments, the way that I've chosen to model it is basically keeping the effort the same as it's modeled now. So not changing that quota. If we were to change the quota, we would of course have higher encounters and higher impacts. So we would actually see things go in the opposite direction if we were to hold that quota at the same level, as in more stilly impacts.
Thank you.
Looks like Ryan is next in line. Go ahead, Ryan.
I was wondering if there is actually post-encounter mortality, like, and what that kind of number is, or what you guys are looking at for that.
Do you want to take that one, Derek, or do you want me to?
I can take that one. As far as our post-release mortality goes, it varies on legal and sublegal fish. And so on legal fish, it's 10% in our sport fisheries in Puget Sound. And on our sublegal fish, it's 20%. Additionally, for the legal fish, we do apply a drop-off mortality rate of 5%.
Thank you.
Derek, I might be interested if we could just maybe take a look at the effects of a 20-inch size limit in the winter. I know that, we've heard some discussion around that as far as that would allow, more fish in the cooler, less releases. I know that's something we've been looking at as an agency and as a staff. So could you just maybe walk through that a little bit?
Sure, thanks, Mark. So Looking down here at this 20-inch size limit, I've only modeled it in our winter fisheries. And so the places that we have winter fisheries open at the moment are areas 5, 10, 11, and 13. In the initial modeling, that's where we have them open. So you can see that in doing that, the modeled increased catch is about 800 fish. And you can see that it's not that expensive on stilly impacts. It's about 1 fish. You can see that it has a pretty decent, relative to some of our other actions, it has a pretty decent catch per stilly impact. So that's another thing worth noting. But I'm going to put you on the spot, Mark, because if we make that change there, then we should probably be looking at where else we could make changes to make sure that we're under our 62 fish.
Well, you don't have to put me on the spot, Derek. I just want to put things out there for consideration for folks as we're kind of looking. So obviously, as you said, that if we were going to go in that direction, we'd need to make a corresponding move that would reduce our Stiligwamish impacts in some other place. I think that's the point you were trying to get at.
Yes, that's correct. I see Carl's hand raised.
Thanks, Derek. I really appreciate you putting that, that's something we've been asking for a long time. And it's really good to see, that there is, it's just, we have to see what the impact is of doing that. And we can see it does cost something. So it's not a magical way to harvest fish without increasing impacts, it appears. That 80% survival of those sublegal fish is lost, I guess, when you start keeping them. However, I noticed that, you modeled it in all the areas open in the winter. We have one area in particular where it's been a real problem, the sublegal impacts a couple of the seasons, and that's mostly been in Marine Area 10. I think the areas that could benefit from a 20-inch size limit would be Area 10 and possibly 11. So I think if you were to consider something like this and having to pay for it, it would be really beneficial to look at what the impact would be in just 1 or 2 areas and not broadly. Now, maybe that's a problem with enforcement, and maybe you want to keep it consistent, but that's just my first thought when I saw that. Thank you.
Well, and I don't want to derail this discussion, Derek and Jake. I don't know if you're listening, but maybe this might be a good time to bring up the last presentation. Our recreational biologist, Dr. Kirsten Simonson, has been kind of looking at this size issue, and we had a couple of slides put together where we may be able to take a look at that.
Yep, give me just a second to pull it up on the screen.
Not to put you on the spot, Kirsten.
Just prepared for this, so we're good.
Okay, good.
So this is kind of a quick first look at some of the test fishery data that's been collected this winter. So we, some of the things we've heard are kind of talking about either changing the size limit. And again, so you can see the 2 red lines here. The solid red line is the line at 22 inches, which is the current size limit. And the red dashed line is the proposed decreased size limit of 20 inches. And we can also see here, so I have this mapped out by Julian Day, which is just the day of the year starting with, so January 1 is day 1, and then December 31st would be day 365. So this just kind of shows you kind of the trends over the entire season. So I put in the 2 vertical lines that show the start of February and the start of March, just to kind of orient you of kind of how this looks throughout the season. And the blue line that you see there with the kind of the gray shading around it is the trend in length over time of this for the test fishery data. And you can see that there is a slight trend, but I will say that statistically this trend is not significant. So we don't have like a really strong trend. And we also, the fit of this line, which is basically how well the data fits to that actual blue line, is very poor. And what that basically means is that we don't see a whole lot of difference between the size of fish later in the season as compared to January, even though you do see that slight increase. So the other thing that you can see is that where the kind of the average sizes are, it's still, if we change the size limit, that doesn't really get us a whole lot of fish back. What else do we want to say about this, Mark?
Well,
if anybody has any specific questions, please let me know, but go ahead.
I mean,
Mark.
I think I'd throw the caveat out there, Kirsten, that this is just this winter.
This is
The
just
trend
this
we've
winter.
seen this winter. We haven't kind of done this pretty broad analysis over all the years that we've been doing test fishing. Kirsten's pretty new to the agency within the last 3 months. So this is just some initial kind of looks from this winter. Obviously, this is stuff we're going to be looking at with all the data that we had, the test fishing data, as we go forward, and Kirsten gets up to speed on the data that's available to her, along with all the other duties that we pile on her. So I don't know if we wanted to look at the next slide. I think we had done some, oh, right. Do you want to walk through this one really quick, Kirsten?
Yeah, so this is the actual catch data from the winter fishery and again, this is all of the years that we have actual CRC data for the winter fishery. So you can see starting in 2009 and then going up through this year. And so what I had done here is I plotted up, the blue line is fish greater than 56 centimeters, which is the 22-inch size limit we have now. The orange line is between 51 and 56 centimeters, which would be fish between that 20 and 22 inch. So it's basically the fish that would be impacted by a decrease in the size limit. And then the gray bars are anything that would be under that 51 centimeters, which is the less than 20 inches that we have, that is the proposed change in size limit. So the things that I kind of want to point out in this is that amount of fish is a pretty significant proportion of what we're seeing in the Area 10 winter fishery. And so we've had some discussions about what that would mean in terms of if that change was made, would we burn through the quota more quickly? Would it, actually be beneficial because you would have, more, you'd have less sublegal encounters and therefore more keepers. So we're still trying to kind of piece through all of this information and what that would mean. But the reason I wanted to show this slide is basically to show you what a large proportion of fish that could be and how quickly we could potentially burn through that quota. The other thing that this shows is that because there is such a large proportion of those fish, that the possibility of enacting gear restrictions might kind of decrease some of those sublegal encounters. Again, that's information that we're still collecting and that has not been processed at all. I have all that data sitting and waiting, ready to go, but I have not had the time to start going through it yet. So we don't have any information to present on what a gear restriction would look like. But this is just basically to show you kind of a breakdown of, in those kind of broad sized classes, what the catch looks like for the last, 10 plus years.
Thank you, Kirsten. Appreciate that.
Mark, did you want me to go back to Derek and the modeling tool at all?
Yes, please. So don't have any hands raised currently. I might just pause for a second. See if any there might be any other questions or comments. I know we're specifically kind of focused on marine seasons right here. We do have staff on the line if people have any thoughts or ideas about freshwater seasons, we can try to address those too. Go ahead, Carl.
I always have thoughts and comments. So, looking at this tool, just considering the comments, trying to balance the public request, the public's desire here, there are a number of people that are very concerned about reducing that Area 9 summer quota in order to recover, some winter fisheries. And, what I think some folks would like to see if you checked box 32 instead of 33, and line, row 32 there for 5,000 fish reduction. And you closed, line 42 to close area 10 in January. Would that get you enough fish for February and March in 10 and March in area 9? It does. So, but then if you go to February and March in 9, that probably pushes you over. If you did that instead, yeah, then you're way over. So that might be something to consider. That might be a balance of desires for the public. You get March open in area 9, you get February and March open in area 10. And you reduce the summer quota to 5,000. I've heard some real grumblings about modeling last year's catch because many people think that was an anomaly, how slow the Chinook fishing was. So I think that you'll see some support for that type of proposal for opening some additional winter fisheries. Was my first thought there. And then just a quick comment on the 20-inch size limit. I'm still processing that information, and I would like to see what that would cost just in area 10, but I don't know if you guys are open to that with enforcement considerations and all those challenges. But that's, it is something we fought for a long time, but I'm not sure how exactly we pay for it. But you're pretty close there, 62.2. So with those actions of the 5,000 reduction and the loss of a month in area 10, it kind of helps pay for it, but it doesn't fully pay for it. So I don't know how fair that is. But if you reduce the number, maybe took 5 out of there, they don't have that many shakers at 5. I mean, but then it doesn't help you as much. But I'm kind of thinking out loud here. I've used up enough time. Thank you for your time.
Appreciate your thoughts as always, Carl. Go ahead, Derek.
Thanks, Carl. And one thing I wanted to mention about this is there is some of these actions are kind of mutually exclusive with each other, where if you, so for example, in area 10, you couldn't check both the box for increasing the size limit to 24 and 26, because then you'd kind of be double counting the benefit that you get. Along those kind of same lines, with the way that I've modeled the 20-inch size limit over here, it does kind of consider current seasons. And so the increase might not be quite as much, although I don't know exactly what benefit you would get if you were closed in January in area 10. So there is a little bit of double counting there, but I would suspect that it would be pretty close to the 62.2 or 62. So anyway, I see Brett's hand raised.
Shall I go ahead?
Citizen Brett, go ahead.
So I just have one comment in regards to fairness, sharing, equality. One thing I haven't heard anything about is area 8. In the last 26 years or so, the one and only area in Puget Sound that never had a summer Chinook fishery has been area 8. This last year, the one area that had no blackmouth fishery, again, area 8. And I understand why, but I just want to make a pitch for sharing the pain, sharing the glory. That's all.
Thanks for that, Brett. I know area 8 seems kind of like the unluckiest marine areas, I guess, in the past couple of years, where we've been with coho, concerns for coho stocks, the Stillaguamish stock being smack dab in the middle of marine areas 8.1 and 8.2. And then, yeah, like I said, the recent year coho downturns with Snohomish especially have really made big reductions in that area. We realize that. But thank you for bringing that up, Brett. I know you echo a lot of anglers and people that like to fish those areas around Everett. So thank you for that.
Hello, Mark. Can you hear me?
Go ahead, Steve.
I was trying to raise my hand, but I haven't been able to figure out how to do it on this new screen that I'm using here, so I apologize for that.
No problem.
I would make a comment on the proposal for the 20-inch size limit. And I have changed my views on this over the years, and have probably drank in the Kurt Kramer Kool-Aid on this topic. And that is the vast dwindling that we've seen in size of Puget Sound Chinook over my lifetime. It was not that long ago when any Chinook that was under 30 inches was considered to be a jack. And those fish have gotten smaller and smaller and smaller until in our current sampling inside the sound, almost no fish over 30 inches are recorded. And we've obviously had lots of human impact on these fisheries from fishing, and that, we think of Chinook as a 3 to 5 year fish, when Chinook used to be a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and even 10-year-old fish. And those older fish are all gone, primarily, I think, because they spend the longest time in the fishery, and fish that return earlier spend the shortest time in the fishery, therefore are subject to vastly different harvest rates over the long term. And when you reduce the size limit, the fastest growing fish spend the longest time in the harvestable range in the fishery. So when you reach January or February and you have fish that are the same age, some of those fish are under 22 inches and some of those fish are 22 inches and above. When you lower to 20, you put a greater harvest rate on the fastest growing fish in the fishery, and that over time, and not that much, continues to exacerbate the man-made problem that we see with the size of our fish, and just reducing, when fish decline in size that much, it's not just anglers who want to catch larger fish. It's that when Chinook are 8 to 12 to 15 to maybe 20 pounds, instead of 15 to 30 and 40 pound fish, each one of those fish is a lot different food for the orca. And I appreciate the state's position of wanting to increase access to hatchery fish, and thereby lowering the cost that we spend to raise a fish that actually ends up in an angler's hands, and how that affects what hatchery production cost benefit looks like when the state's trying to get funding for that. But I also think that too many decisions regarding salmon management have been made based on political reasons and not on what is best for the fish. And although my customers and myself would be happy to harvest some fish that were 20 inches long and it would put smiles on some people's faces, I think that we need to err on the side of caution and what is in the best interest of the fish. That's all. Thank you.
Appreciate your thoughts, Steve.
Hello, can you hear me?
Go right ahead, Gary.
Yeah, I'm with Steve. I can't seem to raise my hand. I can't find the option to do so. But I just wanted to comment on Brett Barkdahl's statement about Area 8. What is the, and in regards to Area 8, what is the coho and pink salmon projected season this year in those? I thought I saw a matrix early on, but I can't find it now. And so can you tell me what those are?
Sure, Gary, no problem. So the current proposal is for areas 8.1, it's August and September. for non-selective for coho and pink. And then for 8.2, I believe the proposal is August 1 through Labor Day weekend. I think it's the 6th. And that is similar to the 2019 regulations where we were fishing south and west of the Clinton Mukilteo line.
Okay, well, as Brett reiterated, Area 8.1 and 8.2 have not seen Chinook opportunities and have sort of accepted, not really, the fact that they do get a good pink and a coho fishery south of that Mukilteo line. I see that we're not giving them much opportunity on the coho again, and none last year. So they certainly need some consideration for some additional opportunity in those two areas, without a doubt. They were the first one zeroed out last year when we talked about this. Issue with the Stillaguamish. So, some expanded coho opportunity with the Chinook impacts that are associated with that would go a long ways to at least help this area. And I see you do have some Chinook, at least a Chinook opportunity listed here for the month of March. And I see the impacts associated with that. So along with some of them other boxes checked, like the March one in 9, and then the reduction in 9 to 5,000 fish, that's, I have the old tool, I don't have the new tool. So what does this show us? That's 63.4, and then take area 10 to March and take January out in 10. And those guys are all, that still looks like we're up there a little ways. So I guess we assumed that there were, when we looked at the old tool, we assumed that there were some stilly impacts available to work with, that it was like 4 or 5 fish. I don't know how, I missed the very first part of this meeting, and I don't know how we got to 62 at the start of this. It looks like I don't see anything in here about area 11. What's been done with that area something had to have been done there to get us to 62 from 50, I believe it was 57 or 56 in the old one before we started adding and subtracting. So I guess my question is, how did we get to 62 to start this?
So Derek, I don't know. So what some of the advisors have been talking about is we sent them a copy of this tool kind of before Derek had upgraded it. They keep speaking of a 57 number, but my recollection is when we were looking at this, that it has always been 62 fish has been our target. And Gary, to speak to your question, how we arrived at that number was through conversations with the Stillaguamish tribe, as well as kind of what we've attempted to do in recent years as far as sharing the overall impact 50-50 was essentially where we were trying to target our fisheries this year. We did the modeling calculation, and that equated to about 124 fish, dead stilly fish.
And I'm not disputing the 62 being the target. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the previous tool that we got, which showed some options for area 11 in that previous tool. And before any options were clicked or adjusted, that tool showed a 57 and the target was still 62. So looking at that tool, it looked like there were at least those 5 fish still available that could be adjusted for. I'm asking where that went.
If you give me just a moment, Gary, I'm just going to reopen that old tool for myself and kind of reacquaint myself with it. If I remember right, I don't think it was quite 5. I think it was 5 before we did those effort adjustment updates that I spoke to earlier. But you are right in that the little bit of in the room that there was some of that did go to area 11 in opening November, December for Chinook, as well as opening June. But give me just one moment here, and I'll
Okay,
have a
so
quick
you
look at
did
it.
make that action, which is not characterized on this screen that we're currently showing in area 11. So that's where I understand that those 4 or 5 points, fish, numbers, whatever you want, that's where they went. I get it. But my question is that how this whole group wanted those impacts used? Because those were impacts that were under discussion in the previous North of Falcon meeting.
And I can confirm, Gary, I just looked at the old tool after the effort updates and
What was
after
the effort update that you made? Is it in the old tool or is it something that's different than the old tool?
It is. So in the old tool, if folks recall, the one that we presented on March 16th, there was kind of 4 actions at the beginning that we considered to be pre-run actions. And those were actions that were basically to update the effort based off our new effort data that we were seeing in the fisheries, as well as to change those area 9 and area 7 summer quotas to what they were last year to reflect kind of the fisheries that we had last year on those. And after all of those updates, it put us at 59.3 stillyfish. So with 2.7 fish available to harvest to get to that 62 metric that we've been looking at. And that 2.7 fish did come from from area 11 in the winter and then area 11 in June.
So area 11 in June is 0.72 and area 11 in what months did you click?
November and December.
Is that what, 0.2 or 1 point something?
It was approximately 2 fish.
Pretty close to 2.
Okay. So we used 3 fish in area 11 to get those to get that to 62 is what you're saying.
That's correct.
Okay. So that is 3 options that, or, you know, that's different than this previous matrix showed.
Yeah, in this new one that I've kind of created for this meeting today, I was really looking at kind of some of the options that we had heard in the March 16th meeting, and it's my apologies that we don't have area 11 in here. Pretty much all of these options were things that we heard in the March 16th meeting with a few exceptions. And so that's what I was really focusing on, was making sure that I was kind of modeling what folks were interested in seeing.
I have a question and then a follow-up if that's possible.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mike.
Why was Area 8.1 closed last year?
My recollection, Mike, and sorry, all these years kind of run together, but my recollection was we had a poor forecasted return for coho to the Skagit, and that we needed to restrict our fisheries to make sure that we were staying off Skagit coho. Also, there's a bit of Snohomish coho caught in area 8.1. And as I've said, that one's been a real stock of concern over the last number of years. So I think it had both benefits to Skagit and Snohomish, if my memory serves correctly.
Well, and then we had the Stillaguamish unmarked challenge in Chinook across all fisheries that closed lots of winter fishing.
Well, I had a follow-up question there too. So do we have good data on, I know that, for instance, Stillaguamish, Chinook is a big area of concern. Do we have good data on how many fish actually come through Deception Pass? Obviously, most for the Skagit, but how many actually go to the Stillaguamish through Deception Pass?
So Mike, on this one's a little bit of a tricky question to answer. I don't think we have a perfect sense of exactly what percentage of the Stillaguamish stock is going through Deception Pass versus getting back to their natal river through other areas. What we do have is we do have coded wire tag recoveries in the winter fishery, at least. I guess in the summer fishery we do if we search back farther, and we can our tags are our best tool for looking at those distributions of where the fish are.
Yeah, I would guess, I mean, it's just totally a guess, but it would seem to me that most of the Stillaguamish fish would come and go around the south end of Whidbey Island. And so closing 8-1, I'm not in this particular category, but I have several friends who are. They're elderly, they're semi-disabled, and to take 8-1 away from those people was a very difficult thing last year. A lot of them don't have boats that can get out into Area 7, 15, 20 miles out into Area 7. And so you're basically taking salmon fishing off the table for those people that don't either have the boat for it or they don't have the physical stamina or capability. If you would have some opportunity in Area 8-1, it would make a world of difference for those people.
So Mike, just to make sure that I'm clear what you're advocating for, are you advocating for both winter and summer opportunity, or were you focused more specifically on winter?
More so on summer. Again, I think when you look at the demographic that I'm talking about there, for the same reasons that a lot of them can't get out to Eagle Point or Hind Bank, they probably don't fish in the winter much either. So I would say the one that hurt the most was taking salmon fishing away from those people last year in the summertime.
Thank you, Mike, for your thoughts. So just maybe I'll put this out there for folks to consider as they're having trouble finding the raise hand feature. Down at the bottom of my Zoom screen as I'm looking at it is a little smiley face that says reactions. If you click on that, there's a raise hand feature there that you can use. So just FYI, like I said, I know there's depending on the Zoom version you have, there's any number of different places you could find it, but.
Hello.
Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah. The item that you just mentioned, when I click on it, the only options are thumbs up or clap. And Carl sent me a screenshot of his, and it's different than mine.
Yep.
I don't find anything other than thumbs up and clap, which I can use. That's fine. But anyway, to speak to the previous thing about Area 8, I will say that I know a lot of these same guys that he's talking about. And a Chinook, winter Chinook fishing was very, very important to a lot of these guys launching from Camino Island State Park and up in the 8-1 area. And so I also remember from previous years of doing this that the division of winter Chinook fishing in the model runs was 75% for 8.2 and 25% for 8.1. If someone wants to try to figure out something for that, okay? So that tells me that 8.1 may in fact be able to have a March fishery for Chinook with a very small amount of these. I'm assuming this area 8 that you have includes 8.1 and 8.2, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So I'm saying we may just consider 8.1 for that, and reduce that even by half would be a chance to get under that. So, because I do remember it being 75-25 in previous years when we went through this exercise. So, and I know that winter fishery, there's a couple of entities up there that really, really, really value their winter Chinook fishery. Some of them, that's the only fishery that they participated in, and were very, very dissatisfied this last winter. I will tell you that. So, okay.
Thank you, Gary. Looks like David has his hand up. Go ahead, David.
So I have two questions. First one is, did we consider switching area 10 opening from January to February? I don't see that option here. And second one has to do with exactly what assumptions were made to come up with the 62 fish limit. Is there a list somewhere?
Do you want to tackle both of those, Derek?
Yeah, I'll start off with the assumptions on the 62 fish. On that one, I kind of made some assumptions in the modeling as to what it looked like getting us to 8% on the unmarked and 12% on the marked. And I saw that getting us to those percentages, there would be approximately 123 or 124 fish harvested. There is a very, very small amount of wiggle room there. That's why I'm saying 123 or 124. There are other things that could come into play, such as changes to the Canadian fisheries, for example, that we're expecting to come in the future here. But at least from what I've been looking at, that seems to be a pretty accurate estimate. And it was in March 16th, and it continues to be so now. Once again, just reiterating, when I'm looking at 123 or 124 harvestable fish, I'm looking at, when I say 62, I'm looking at about half of that, considering that half of that goes to treaty as well.
So the other question was about January in area 10. So if you look at where Derek's at on his screen right now, line 42 essentially closes area 10 in January. So we have considered that. We have heard that suggestion as well.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, so my question wasn't that. It was, have we considered closing for January, but opening for February? And maybe aligning area 9 and area 10 fisheries so they're both open in February. What does that look like?
Well, so what you see on the screen, closing January, in the current modeling, it's open from January through March. So by closing that January, essentially we're keeping February and March open as part of this look.
And so that gets back to the 62, how the 62 is configured in terms of what are those specific openings in what areas. And I don't know that there's a list somewhere or not. And so Derek certainly made a list to come up with that.
Yeah, there's a number of different fishery proposals. They're on our website. So if you go to the North of Falcon webpage on our website and you click on public input, you will find all of the proposed fisheries that are in the modeling currently. If we want to, I don't know if we have the ability to, we can kind of put the matrix back up on the board of kind of what seasons are currently proposed. But as it's currently proposed, there's a January through March opener in area 10.
Thank you.
Yep.
Jake, I stopped sharing momentarily if you want to put the matrix up on the screen.
I have a question.
Gary, I'm going to come back to you. There's a few other
Okay.
people with their hand up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Carl.
Okay, yeah, I'm unmuted. Just one quick comment to the gentleman's request of, about February in Area 9. If you look at the lines, I'm not seeing it now. It's like 41 and 42. The difference between January and February, no, I'm sorry, February and March and just March is like 2.8 fish. It's very costly on Stillaguamish for the month of February in Area 9 is what I was noticing. But my comment, the reason I raised my hand was just, along this Area 8 discussion. I really appreciate, the need for those folks that have completely lost their fishery. And again, I'm looking at the kind of the distribution of those 2.7 fish that were left after the adjustment, and we're all kind of allocated to Area 11. I'm hopeful that after this process, maybe there's some adjustments. If you did end up reducing any of those 3 months that were added to Area 11, such as June, November, and December, folks that I've been texting with, if they had to give up one of those months to get Area 8 open in the winter and more evenly distribute this conservation burden, that the loss of June would be more, folks might be more willing to give that up than the winter months in Area 11. But that's just from the few people that I've spoken with. But I do think that there should be some consideration again to fairness on how we're trying to distribute these impacts and trying to consider maybe some kind of winter fishing in Area 8.
Thanks, Carl. I'm going next to a phone number. It's a 253 number ending in 811. Go ahead and unmute yourself. Might need to press *6 to unmute yourself.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Art Tatchell. I would like to make a comment about Marine Area 11 and the idea of expanding that effort there. I think everybody has to remember, angler opportunity is a huge deal. I mean, in that Marine Area 11 is in a heavily populated area. That would provide a lot of angler trips and opportunity at relatively low cost to the Stillaguamish. And just that's the comment I wanted to make. So there, thank you.
Thanks, Art. Wayne was next in line. Go ahead, Wayne.
Hey, Mark, Derek, thanks for having me first. I want to please ask for your forgiveness on my ignorance. I'm new to this, and I'm trying to get up to speed. And I think the more people that can attend this, the better, especially us new people. But if you could, on the stock analysis tool, can you kind of walk through Area 7 and why the impacts or the goals in category G or in column G? Why? Can you kind of explain how Area 7, why they're mostly red and orange to me, and what those impacts are, please?
Sure.
Nope.
I can take this one, Mark, if that's all right.
Yeah, I was gonna say thanks to Wayne for joining us as a new person. We really like hearing that new folks are joining and learning. So thanks, Wayne. Go ahead, Derek.
Sure.
And I really appreciate the question there as well, Wayne. To kind of get at that a little bit, the way that we're tracking our stock distributions, what's being caught by stock in each of our fisheries, is through coded wire tag recoveries. And using those coded wire tag recoveries, we can identify kind of what proportion of our catch is coming from which stocks. And so the catch by stocks in each area differs. And in Area 7, Area 7 is one of the ones where we see more of our coded wire tag recoveries for Stillaguamish being caught. And so because of that, it's a very costly area per Stillaguamish impact to have catch there. You can see, for example, in Area 10, a place where you might not expect the Stillaguamish to be as often, you can see that we kind of get those greater catch per Stillaguamish impact values. Area 7 is one of the ones both in the summer and winter where we see that being higher. And I hope that helps to explain. I might just maybe pause and see if you have any additional questions following that.
No, that does explain. Thank you, Derek. I just wanted to try and get up to speed on why the significance of Area 7 is so much different than the other areas. So thank you very much.
So next is Gary and then Tom. Go ahead, Gary.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, couple of things. One of them is we were discussing Derek was just discussing the Stille impacts. When I look at the tool that we had before that had Area 11 in it, in the June timeframe, it shows 752 total impacts, yet it shows 1,037 Stille impacts. Can you explain that to me?
Thanks, Gary. Once again, I've now closed the old tool again that we were using before. If I remember right, Area 7 or Area 11 in June rather, Area 11 in June was one of the areas that had one of the higher catches per Stille impact, and it signified kind of that we could get more catch out of that area and time period for the Stillaguamish impacts that it was costing us. I think it was around 700, if I remember right.
It's 752 fish, but yet over on the Stille in it says 1,037. It's the only one that has more Stille impacts than it has total fish, and a 1.38 percentage. So June, according to what I see in Area 11, is extremely costly for the benefit on Stille impacts, or else them numbers are not correct. I don't know which it is, but that's one of the things. It looks like with that, every 10 fish caught in Area 11 is a Stille. Yet 1 in 30 in Area 10 is a Stille. Just, I don't know, something doesn't seem quite right there.
So I have I'm looking at my old tool again here, Gary, and I think that I think what you're looking at there in that 1,037, what that column represents is it represents the total catch per one Stille mortality. So a higher number there actually signifies an action that's less costly. And what that column that you're looking at is saying is it's for folks who aren't looking at this exact one, Gary's looking at this column G essentially in this tool. And when we see a higher number here, it actually signifies that you can get a greater number of catch per one Stille impact. So that number is not the total number of Stille impacts. It's kind of the catch in the catch in the fishery per that one.
Thank you for explaining that. Okay, the other thing is that I see that we're using Chinook high option 30,724 Chinook in the ocean is 56.8. Is that not correct?
No, in column C.
In this one we have 31,000.
Yeah, in column C, what that's representing is the total Puget Sound sport catch. So it is based off the high ocean option that we're looking at here. However, that doesn't that has a little bit of an effect on the Puget Sound sport catch, but relatively a small one in the modeling. So when you're looking at that metric in column C, keep in mind that that's Puget Sound sport. And then when you're looking at the top rows, these ones up here that I've highlighted on the screen now,
yeah,
that's representing the total marine catch in our sport fisheries from area 5 through 13. And then when you look at the individual actions, say this one that I have highlighted now, that's the decrease to our total sport catch that would be caused by taking that action in a specific area.
Sure, I get that. I guess my question is if the, I have some confidence that the high option is not going to be the option in the ocean. And probably somewhere between high and medium is more than likely to make sense. So that's probably 5,000 less coho or less Chinook than what's being modeled here for the ocean. What kind of change can we expect that to the stilly?
In my kind of preliminary modeling, I have looked at a whole bunch of different ocean option scenarios, and the one that you've outlined where we dropped non-treaty by approximately 5,000 fish. And it is a really, really good question. It is something I've looked at. Stilly doesn't really have that many impacts in the non-treaty fisheries in the ocean. They're relatively small. If we were to drop the quota by about 5,000 fish, it would equate to about 0.4 of a stilly impact.
That's the number I wanted. Thank you. That's the end of my questions at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, my question had to do with that high option and if there was any savings, because I believe, you know, with Gary, it's very, very likely that we're going to end up, as we always do. I mean, I'm not reinventing the wheel here, probably end up on that medium option somewhere. I would like to voice my support, though, for both Gary Crine and Brett Barkdahl's discussion with regard to Marine Area 8. And I was just wondering if we had checked the following boxes moving. So let's increase summer size limit to 26 inches across all areas. So talking 5, 6, 7. Let's open A8 in March, and let's close area 10 in January. And I would just like to see where that meters us out as a regulation package with regard to stilly. And I'll put myself back on mute.
I think just to double check and confirm that I got that all there, Tom. So we checked 26 inches for area 5, 6, 7, and 9. Probably 10 as well is what you were thinking.
Yes, sir.
And then we closed January in area 10, and then we opened area 8 in March. And you can see where that puts us at is at about 58 stilly fish.
So that's reasonable. And then, as we talked about last week, what is your gut? Maybe this is a question for Mark Balzell with regard to the tribes acquiescing to a 26-inch maximum size. Thank you.
Well, I guess I only have previous experience to go on. We have not raised a size limit change with them this year. If folks remember when we did discuss it last year, it was later in the North of Falcon process than where we are right now. I think if this was a consideration that we needed to move forward with, that obviously the sooner's better than later. But that being said, I guess, knowing what the co-manager reaction was last year, I think it would be an additional struggle for the state to try to implement a size limit change like that in all those marine areas this year. I think, Tom, the other thing that we think about when we would do that is how much catch we may be reducing to get at that size limit and afford that other opportunity is another metric that we'd be thinking about too. But great suggestion. Obviously something we can look at.
One last thought to that, and can you scroll down just a little bit there? I want to see if area 9 in the winter was included in that. Are we still? Yeah, we're open in March in 9, right? So click that one, and that will likely put us over a half a fish, 0.2 of a fish. No, we're still under.
Yep.
Okay. So So just to be clear, that would open okay, scroll back up again, please, Derek. What is the cost of A6 in March? Yeah, that would put us way over. Okay, so right now, potentially, we could look at with a 26-inch summer size limit, having concurrent openings in 5, 8, 9, and 10 in the wintertime, in a March timeframe. And maintaining our summer opportunity and not taking a hit on summertime quota.
I think that's all accurate there. The one correction that I would that I would make, Tom, is that once again we're keeping our effort the same as we do size limit modeling, and so it would change those quotas by a little bit.
Received and understood. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom. Looks like Gabe is next. Go ahead, Gabe.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I just wanted to point out that there's been a tremendous amount of pressure on Area 10 Coho in June. I know there were some concerns expressed about that, and I think having Area 11 open in June for Chinook would alleviate some of that pressure and hopefully quell some of those concerns. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabe. Ryan is next with his hand up. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I'm also kind of new about this. And so I was just wondering about the total Puget Sound sport catch. So is that estimated that we would actually have 100% of that sport catch be attained, and then the rest, like there's a different forecast for the river return, or is that like aiming if the 100% of the sport catch is not caught, then the remaining would be like the total return of the well. This is probably just how this modeling works and how we're talking about this, but just a question.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I'll take a stab first, and then maybe let Derek answer. So I believe what Derek has represented here is just marine area catch, and does not include kind of any freshwater projections of catch. We have to be careful about how much if we don't achieve our full catch, how that may equate to a particular river system or river fishery. I think one of the things we've tried to point out from last year is we did have a pretty decent catch quota in like the area 9-10 fisheries last year. We had full seasons and did not achieve those catch quotas for the first time in a long time. So I think that's another one. We have these forecasts of abundance, but that's what they are. They're forecasts. They're not actual returns, and oftentimes we're not very precise when it comes to forecasts. As we saw last year, we had lower returns to a number of those South Sound Chinook hatchery programs where we didn't make broodstock goals. And it's my opinion, I don't have any specific information, but it's my opinion that contributed to us having not achieving our full catch shares from last summer. So Derek, did you have anything to add?
No, I think you covered it well, Mark. The one, I guess maybe the one additional thing that I would add, and just to make sure it was clear, is that these Puget, as we're doing the modeling and we're modeling marine area sport catches, those are of course affecting the resulting escapement and what's making it back to the freshwater in the modeling.
Great, and if I can relay that back to you, so this modeling is just for the sport catch, and there is an independent like return for escapement and freshwater salmon catches that also occurs in this, and this is only that marine sport.
Yeah, because of the focus of the meeting today, I really wanted to hone in on that Puget Sound marine sport. In the modeling, we do have all the fisheries along the west coast, so that does include the freshwater water ones as well as the non-Puget Sound areas and tribal fisheries and whatnot.
And then one last clarifying question is this data available like publicly that we can get to the assumptions, run on the model, and like we can play around with different scenarios and forecast numbers also?
If you're interested, we do have documentation on the FRAM model through the Pacific Fishery Management Council website. And we also recently, one of our staff members kind of recently updated a user manual on our model, Dan Auerbach. I can forward those to you in a private message. I can forward you on kind of the information from the Pacific Fishery Management Council website on that one.
Great, I would really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Looks like Rodney is next in line. Go ahead, Rodney.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Okay, I just have a question. I fish the Tulalip Bubble terminal fishery every year, and essentially that's at the mouth of the Stilly. How much impact does that fishery have on these precious Stilly fish? Thank you.
If you give me one moment, I'll see if I can pull up the stock composition of that fishery, Mark.
I can answer that if you want it.
Go ahead, Gary.
We went through this several years ago, and the data that we have or did have at that time was from the Tulalip terminal net fishery. Had no sampling from sports fishery. And at that time, their net fishery showed 0 Stilly impact, i.e. a clean fishery catching Tulalip fish and hatchery fish headed for the Skycomish. So that's the reason that it's been allowed to go. I don't know if the model has any impacts in it, the current model, but I know the previous one that we inspected about 5 years ago had 0 in it.
Thanks, Gary. And just to follow up, I was just looking at the stock composition, and the vast majority of what we're getting in the coded wire tags does appear to be Tulalip fish. There is some Snohomish in there, and some Stilly too, but it's very small compared to the total Tulalip fish that we're catching in that fishery.
The other comment I would make is that generally speaking, that Tulalip bubble fishery is a lower effort, lower catch fishery than a lot of our other summer fisheries. So Dan is next in line. Go ahead, Dan.
Hello, how's everyone this morning?
Great, Dan.
We've spent a lot of time here on Stilly, which is obviously our stock of concern, but I was curious if Derek is watching some of our other stocks and whether these Stilly exercises are solving the Skagit issue or a potential mid-Hood Canal issue that we still don't have a management objective on, I'm assuming.
Yeah, Dan, we're still in discussions with the Hood Canal tribes, much like we were last year. If folks remember, we were actually involved in part of kind of our dispute resolution process under the US v. Washington court case. We were in a meet and confer process through the last preseason about the Mid-Hood Canal management objective. We've managed to not have to do that this year. We're still in discussions with all those co-managers about that objective. I think it feels like we're in a fairly decent spot that we're kind of centering around what that was last year, which was 12.4% exploitation rate. Again, we haven't reached final agreement, but it feels like we're on a good path to have that same management objective this year.
Great. And the other part of the question is solving these Stilly issues going a long ways towards solving Skagit?
Yeah, the Skagit one's a little tougher, especially if we're looking at the spring and summer stocks. It's a lot of those impacts, or a majority of those impacts, are found in the co-manager fisheries in the river. There's very little that we can do in the marine area as far as having significant effects on those exploitation rates. So I would say in general, Dan, as we do fishery shaping that benefits Stiligwamish, it also benefits those Skagit stocks.
All right, thank you. And I would like to say to my peers on the call that today's session has been very productive and genial, and I feel it's gone very much in the way the spirit of North of Falcon is supposed to be. It's been enjoyable today. Thank you, everyone, for that.
Appreciate that feedback, Dan. Jason is next in line. Go ahead, Jason.
Hear me okay?
We can.
Cool. So I'm new to this and just joining late, but I've got a question regarding if it has been decided on the winter fishery for Area 7.
Yeah, Jason, and thanks for joining us, even if it is late. Nothing's been decided yet. That's kind of, well, that is what we're here to talk about today. The current fishery proposal you can find on our website. If you go to the North of Falcon section, there's a little tab under there called Public Input. That is where you'll find the current fisheries proposals by area and month. There's also a pretty comprehensive list of freshwater seasons that are proposed up there. So essentially what we're looking at currently is last year's summer fisheries, or last year's fisheries, I guess, for Area 7 is pretty much what we're looking at this point. And then we're trying to figure out how we can expand that effort throughout Puget Sound, or modify that effort to with the available impacts we have. So thanks for joining us. Hope that answered your question. Looks like Jeff is next in line. Go ahead, Jeff.
All right, can you hear me okay?
We can, Jeff. Welcome.
Okay. Yeah, so I just wanted to make a quick comment in regards to the surveys that are being sent out. I received one just a couple days ago in regards to the last meeting that I attended. So I'm hearing a lot of, kind of a lot of opinion and conjecture by people where, some people really want an increased size limit. Some people really don't want it. Some people want an increase in, or gear restrictions, and some people don't want it. Some people want Area 10 open, some want it closed. So with that, is there any way to actually get a better feel or opinion of the people that are on these calls through those surveys? And basically, the people that are attending when those surveys go out, having those questions listed so we can get a better idea, outside of just people's personal opinions, and amongst their groups, but rather a more broad understanding of how people are feeling on the call. Because I know a lot of people are not going to actually speak up and, and say what they are truly thinking in regards to something. So I just kind of my opinion that I think it'd be if possible, it'd be a good idea to get something like that out there to get an idea of what everyone's thinking. So anyway, thank you.
Appreciate that, Jeff. So this might be a great opportunity for me to plug the website again. For those who may not feel comfortable speaking out or specifically, kind of on a call like this, we do have a public comment tool on our website that folks can provide their comments on any broad array of fishery seasons and packages. There's different selection criteria that you can select what you're interested in commenting on. We check those. I don't know if it's necessarily daily, but we do check them every couple days. We get a download from our web folks, and we're able to kind of sift through those and see. We did have an opportunity last year to do kind of on the spot polling of people who attended the meetings. We haven't done that this year, but we do consider all the opinions, both for and against. As I kind of intimated early on in the meeting, we have a lot of different considerations for how we put these things together. Again, with kind of that commission guidance in mind, and trying to provide the kind of the vast amount of varied opportunities as much as we can. So appreciate your feedback. Always looking to kind of gather as much opinion and information as we can in our decision making. So. So while we have a little break in the action, might be a good idea for me to, and I don't know if we want to switch screens and Jake maybe put his screen back up of kind of that last public comment slide there, Jake. You know, we would invite folks to join us after this call today at 3 for our plenary session with the tribes, our treaty co-managers. We're gonna hear some short little words from both WDFW and tribal leadership about north of Falcon and co-management. And then they are also going to be taking questions, much like we are today in this format. So again, a reminder for that, and inviting folks to join us for that. We would really appreciate that. If folks aren't able to join us, again, it will be available on our website either tonight or tomorrow if folks feel the need to check that out. Also, just a reminder, next week, as we enter into the Pacific Fishery Management Council meetings, we'll be having morning meetings. I believe starting on Thursday at 8. We'll check the website. I'm not sure we've centered in on the days yet. Just knowing that those early days, Wednesday and Thursday of next week, there won't be really much to report on. There'll be some council business that goes on where they try to get towards a singular ocean option, which will then kind of center in our work on the inside in Puget Sound and the Columbia River. So if we are, again, check the website for the dates. We will be having morning meetings starting at 8 every morning to go through the modeling, go through where we are with discussions and negotiations with our co-managers and other states on a fishing package. We'll try to be pretty comprehensive. It's usually a Puget Sound centric discussion in that 8 o'clock hour, but we'll try to have staff available if there's other people that with questions outside of kind of Puget Sound fisheries. We'll try to have those people available to answer those questions as well. We'll continue to do that all the way through the 15th on the end of the Pacific Fishery Management Council meeting. So I would invite folks to join us daily for an update. And as I mentioned before, we'll try to have all those materials updated on our website as we get them. Looks like Brett has his hand up. Go ahead, Brett.
Well, I didn't want to interrupt the saltwater discussions to talk about freshwater at all, but it seems like the discussions are about over. I wanted to go back to the Skagit issue a little bit and how that may affect freshwater seasons in the Skagit. You seem to, well, as you know, I worked on the Skagit for a lot of years, so I have kind of a rough idea what's going on up there. Is there, what do you see happening there as far as any shaping we may have to do with our fisheries? Is there some sort of give that we're going to have to do to get where we need to be on Skagit?
Well, Brett, as you know, things are a little difficult on the Skagit this year. I could give you my opinion about kind of where things are and where we may need to go. I guess I might just characterize it as that there's some really difficult co-manager discussions amongst the tribes about fishing seasons there this year. The department has been asked by Soxawato to make some room for them to fish on the Cascade. We continue to have those discussions. I guess I'm a little uncomfortable with conjecturing whether I think we need to make room or not. I think maybe what I would say to that, Brett, is we feel pretty good about what our fishing package looks like in comparison to our overall effects on those exploitation rates. We feel like there's still some room to go to meet those objectives. And I think we have some difficult conversations coming up. But I guess maybe that's where I'll leave it, is that I feel pretty good. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but I do see Edward on the line, who's our Region 4 program manager. I didn't know if Edward had anything he wanted to add to that discussion, but that's maybe what I'll say about it, and see if anybody else from the department wants to weigh in.
Thanks, Mark. I just wanted to hop on and say hi to Brett. It's been a long time and really appreciate your service in the Skagit. As far as fishery seasons, I think we're actually in a good spot. The co-managers have some hard discussions to have amongst themselves. And from a sports fishery perspective, the conversations that we've been having have been trying to reduce some of the closure time in the Cascade. And so with that, feeling pretty good. Is there any specific questions that you are concerned about, Brett?
No, I mean, I guess you pretty much summed it up, I think. I figured that there were discussions with Soxhawtl tribe that were going on about closure periods for both spring Chinook and coho. I didn't know what specifically about like spring Chinook. There's two spring Chinook seasons that we have on the schedule, and I didn't know if there was some grumbling about that, given the critical status of Cascade Springs. So I'm just curious about what the likelihood was that the seasons that we have dialed in were actually going to occur.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of grumblings going around. But honestly, we're feeling pretty good about the package that we put out there. Same with the Puget Sound package. We put something that we felt that was really reasonable. And so if we need to shape something, especially on the Skagit, I think you're going to see minimal changes, and that would be maybe bag limit, or I'm thinking reduce, or not reduce, but increased opportunity is where my head is, Brett.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome to come back.
We'll talk.
Please.
Mark?
Go ahead, Mr. Kramer.
Yes, I can't figure out how to get, unmute my, or raise my hand. But anyway, a couple questions or a couple comments is the changes we're talking about will keep us in the conservation needs, which is really important. And we're not talking about harvestable fish, we're just talking about allowable impacts. But we need to recognize in doing so, we're going to see a reduction in total catches. And maybe it's changed, but a comment I used to always hear was great concerns about the catch imbalance between the treaty and non-treaty tribes. And as long as we are clear that we're intentionally increasing that discrepancy, then I guess we're good to go. But folks just need to keep that in mind. And then I'd like to remind people that, when we're talking summer and winter Chinook seasons, we're talking Chinook salmon. And when I review the mark selectivity reports that the state puts out in the winter seasons, the typical average Chinook being caught and harvested was about 25 inches. That's more pink size than Chinook size. In the summer, the average Chinook was 28.5 inches. To me, not only when we trade summer opportunities for winter opportunities, we're increasing or decreasing the number of fish we can harvest per Still-Squamish impact. We're also looking at harvesting smaller size fish. And again, I guess it's up to the folks that want to make that decision, but I think that's something that we need to keep in the back of our mind. And I would second the comments some others have made. This has been a really fruitful discussion, and thank you guys.
Appreciate your perspective, Kurt, as always. I got a note here in the chat that Tony has a question. Tony, are you able to unmute?
Yeah, can you hear me, Mark?
I can. Go ahead.
It's a question to Edward. A couple questions on the Nooksack and up Baker Lake and the river. First one's on Baker Lake sockeye. With the forecast so low, we understand there's no rec season. I'm up on Baker Lake. I was wondering if Edward got an agreement with the Upper Skagit tribe not to harvest 2021 Baker sockeye.
So I may take that first, Tony. It's my understanding that under the preseason forecast, there is a small amount of harvestable fish available to the co-managers. I think at this point, the state isn't proposing any fisheries to go after that harvestable. But I think the tribes have proposed some limited fishing to be able to access some of that 2,000 fish. I see another question here in the chat from Norm. I'm not sure that we can answer the Norm's question is, what was the average size of Chinook in marine areas 9, 10, and 11 summer fishery last year? I'm not sure that we've got that information readily available on our fingertips right now, Norm, but we can definitely figure that out and get that back to you.
I think Kurt's already answered my question.
Thank you, Norm. Go ahead, Carl.
Oh, I have so many questions, Mark. We still haven't got to, I think we're probably going to talk a little bit about coho and pink towards the end of this session, I hope. And then also, we've been talking about stilly as our driver the whole time, and then we're gonna, we probably want to touch on what other stocks might jump up as challenges. If we meet stilly, do we meet all other stocks? But my question or comment here was just that, putting my crystal ball on it, I'm really hopeful that we could somehow get to a February and March in 10 in the winter and March in area 9 seems doable. But if we were to end up with a package like that, kind of looking through my crystal ball, I'm seeing the potential of, if we had one of those years where the effort was really incredible in area 10 and then it closed before the month was over, then area 9 gets all the pressure in 1 month. That could be a problem, especially if we're modeling these fisheries and we haven't really updated the effort. So there was an effort update that Derek had that by not completely updating all the effort, we're plugging in a little bit smaller size of quota or encounter sealing in our winter fisheries, which means that in reality, if the effort was a lot higher, we likely would close before we conducted the full season. So in that scenario, I think if you had a 2-month fishery in area 10, that might be a situation where the discussion about a gear restriction might still be an important discussion to have, because if you had that gear restriction in place, even if you did not have data gathered in order to change your modeling, in reality, during the fishery while it is being conducted, you could certainly be more hopeful that you would get the full 2 months in area 10, and that would help relieve that pressure when you got into March, having both the areas open simultaneously.
Yeah, appreciate that, Carl. I guess we didn't have anything kind of formal to talk about when it comes to coho fisheries. I think, we kind of went over what the fishing package looked like there towards the beginning. And I don't know if Jake wants to scroll back and bring it up on the screen. But essentially, we have very similar seasons to what we've had at least last year, the previous couple years. Again, we tried to get some of that added time back in 8.1 and 8.2. I think that's the biggest change from the recent past. You'll see that June fishery is still in place on here for Area 10. We have had some discussions about the potential of that being a mark selective opportunity. I think that's one that we're still kind of waiting on. We haven't had we haven't had a policy level discussion with those Mid-Sound tribes yet. I believe that's happening next week. We have had a technical discussion with those co-managers about a lot of our Area 10 fisheries. And I think the biggest concern maybe that we heard about that June opportunity was just the level of sampling and monitoring. And I think we're taking steps as a department to address that in all our coho fisheries this year. So I think the only reason we would be considering mark selective in that time period was the savings it would give us on those wild stocks, particularly Skagit and Snohomish. We seem to have pretty big effects on both of those wild runs in that Area 10 fishery. But happy to kind of go into any of the coho seasons if anybody's interested in doing a little bit deeper dive. Folks will notice, we've been mark selective in Area 9 for the past number of years since 2015, when we had our coho crash. And then, that's the kind of hole we've been trying to dig ourselves out of from a coho perspective, not just in Puget Sound, but I would say coast-wide since that time period. So
if you did consider a marked coho fishery in Area 10 in June, how far out you think it would be? June and July would be, selective, and then August and September would be non-selective, or how do you think that would look? And then the other thing is, when did we go from no bonus pink limit to a 2? You were at one point you were talking about maybe 1 extra pink, but yeah, it sounds like you're talking no bonus on the pinks.
So we had talked about bonus pinks, Carl, but again, as you know, fishing in these marine mixed stock areas, not all river systems are the same. And so we're looking at, generally some decent returns to Puget Sound. You could say Skagit has a nice return and Snohomish has a nice return, but they're stuck in the middle is Stillaguamish with a preseason pink forecast that's below the escapement goal. So again, we're trying to balance fisheries and conservation as we do every year when we make these decisions, to try to make sure that we're at least providing some opportunity and trying to limit our impacts on those runs where that maybe aren't as healthy as others. So again, just some of those challenges when it comes to marine area mixed stock fisheries. We are going to have some bonus limits in the freshwater fisheries for certain areas. Just depends on what the pink return looks like to each of those systems.
And then on the coho, was there any discussion about how long the mark selective would last if it were to be that?
Again, Carl, it's not something that we've really kind of done a deep dive in or thought a lot about. I was mostly just focused in June. I guess if we were thinking about regulations and continuity, it might make sense to be mark selective until we open for Chinook in Area 10 and then switch to non-selective. Generally, as we've looked at those mark rates, they're pretty consistent through the year. Obviously, we see better mark rates in kind of that July, August time period, and then maybe a little bit worse as you get later into September. But I would say, yeah, for right now, I don't think we're considering any mark selective, but yeah, it makes sense that if we were going to go on that route, it would be in that pre-Chinook fishery time period.
Very good. Thank you.
Gary, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can.
You did speak about just a second ago about river, and could you say when the rivers and what your thoughts were on the bonus pink limit? You just said rivers, and I was wondering which ones and what those are.
Yeah, Gary, and I apologize. I don't have kind of a comprehensive list in my head. So for instance, on the Snohomish, we have coho concerns, but we have what, 500,000 pinks due to come back. That as the season we proposed on the Snohomish is like a pink and mark selective coho opportunity. I don't remember what the daily limits are. I know, for instance, like the Green River has a 6 fish bonus pink limit. And again, I apologize. I don't kind of have that in my head or in front of me. But I would encourage, all those seasons are on the website underneath the public input section. You can see where those bonus limits are.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep. Keith has his hand up. Welcome, Keith.
Welcome. I'm going to beat a dead horse real quick. Is it possible that you could just bookmark an opportunity to monitor a catch and release fishery like we did in 2008 and 2009 to possibly expand some catch and release fisheries? There was a catch and release fishery open. Hold on one second. There was a catch and release open fishery open for 12 years, as a lot of you know. It's going to be a tool we're going to need to use in the future. Probably this year it would be a great tool. But I know that data is an important element to getting anything moved forward in this process. And we started out in 2008, I believe, it might have been 2007, with a 2-week fishery during the winter time, just for monitoring reasons. Then it was expanded to 4 weeks. Then it was expanded to the summertime. But we have to start all over again to show an example of the small impacts that a catch and release fishery can have for those of us that still want to go out and use our boats and are just fine with not retaining fish every time we go out. So I'll get off my pedestal, and hopefully there you can look at an opportunity moving forward to at least use it for monitoring purposes. Thank you.
No problem, Keith, and thank you. I guess I might just ask you really quick. I don't want to make some assumptions, but can I assume you're interested in kind of the same areas that we have had them in the past, thinking about like Area 10 or Area 9?
Yes, that would be probably easiest to monitor, and probably the highest impacts will be in those areas. So it's probably the most effective to monitor as a worst case scenario situation.
Thank you, Keith.
Thanks. Somebody's texted me, asked if you guys would be sending this matrix out for people to, or make it available on the North of Falcon website.
So Carl, it is available on the North of Falcon website. I'll maybe put in a plug again for where folks can find it. If you go to our North of Falcon, well, maybe we'll just start at the beginning. If you click on our website, you have to go to the top with fishing and shell fishing. If you click on there, there's a managing fish populations part of our website. And from there, if you go from managing fish populations to the North of Falcon website, it'll be there. And underneath the North of Falcon page, there's a tab for public input. If you click on the public input tab, there's a number of different documents, Puget Sound marine seasons, Puget Sound freshwater seasons. I believe we have the matrices up there for both Chinook and Coho for Puget Sound. Freshwater fisheries off on the coast and in Puget Sound. So that's why I would encourage folks to go is in that public input section of the North of Falcon page. That's where you're going to find the most updated proposals. And thanks for that, Carl. I was actually going to just maybe start to talk about next steps from our perspective. After following our meeting today, staff will huddle with leadership. We'll kind of pour through a lot of the comments and rehash a lot of the things that we heard today and try to decide what our next steps will be from a modeling standpoint. Again, I think the co-managers are interested in doing another model run before we get to PFMC. And for those of you who have done this for a long time, you know, timing can be everything on when you propose things. So we may or may not choose to put fishery changes on the table following today's meeting, but may wait for additional treaty shaping, tribal shaping of their fisheries before we put more options on the table. So again, we'll have that internal kind of huddle today and figure out best what we feel are our best paths forward following today's meeting and trying to set ourselves up for next week's specific Fishery Management Council meetings. Obviously, as soon as we do any more modeling, we'll share that. We'll send it out to our email distributions and put it up on the website for folks to take a look at. And then, yeah, we'll start into those specific Fishery Management Council meetings next week, where we're trying to center in on a singular ocean option and a singular fishing package for this year. Guess I'm just pausing. I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to provide comment or ask questions. I really appreciate, I guess maybe this is another great time to just stop and say I really appreciate everybody's time. I know you're all doing this voluntarily, eating into your own time to provide your perspectives and opinion, and we really appreciate that. This is an important part of our process where we engage with you folks, and I think we feel really good about the Zoom forum or the online forum for these meetings. We feel it's really been able to kind of expand our outreach versus the old way of doing in-person public meetings often can be very limiting for those folks who can't travel or have other constraints that don't allow them to participate in person. Well, again, I don't want to cut off conversation or discussion. If folks have other feedback they want to provide, I guess maybe where I will go is again, plug our website. We have public comment tools up there that will stay in place through the North Falcon process again. We have staff emails also up there if you want to email us directly. as a staff to provide comments. We take those and consider those as well. And maybe I'll do one more plug here if folks are interested. We are having a plenary session with our tribal co-managers at 3 o'clock today. Tribal and WDFW leadership will be speaking about north of Falcon, about some of our challenges, and then taking questions from the public as well regarding that. So with that, I might just pause and see not really seeing any other hand raises. I might just take a quick pause and see if there's anybody from the agency. Oh, look at that. You talk long enough and somebody raises their hand. Ryan, your hand was up first. Go ahead.
There was some comments about the possible gear restrictions that were getting in place. What are those gear restrictions, and are there like what are the kind of thoughts about that?
Thanks, Ryan. So one of the things that WDFW is doing as part of our monitoring is we have test fisheries in place. This winter in Marine Area 10, when we were conducting our blackmouth fishery, we had a test boat out there that was starting to look at different size gear. So we were essentially looking at bigger hooks, plugs, and how effective or not effective those are at catching fish, and maybe reducing our encounters with sublegal fish. A lot of times in winter fisheries, when you're fishing with spoons and flashers, you tend to attract more smaller size fish and therefore have kind of higher sublegal sized encounters in these fisheries. One of the things that we're studying and considering is if we do, we could put in a bigger gear, a restriction on gear for plugs or bigger size gear that would try to stay away from those fish. It's not something we're proposing. We still have a lot of the data to go through and look at and consider before we would go in that direction. I think we also have some our co-managers in Area 10 have also been along with our monitoring efforts this year. So I think we want a chance to get back with them and discuss that as a possibility. I feel like if we were going to implement that, that we would essentially do it by emergency regulation likely. I don't think we've centered on it as absolutely something that we're going to implement next year. We have been in conversations with people, advisors and other folks who are in the fishing tackle industry. We know that they would want plenty of lead time if we were going to implement some restriction like that. They would want plenty of lead time to make sure that they were able to handle any influx of people needing different gear or specific gear for a fishery. So we're really cognizant of that. We want to make sure that we're working with everybody to put stuff like this in place and consider it. So hopefully I answered your questions there, Ryan.
Yeah, thank you. There was recently also a study done by the Canadian fisheries looking at this kind of gear restriction. Are you using that same literature that's provided from those results in your calculations, or is it only your own test fisheries?
Yeah, I think we've looked at that, but really this is kind of our own sample design with this. Yeah, I mean, we look at all the literature as we're considering kind of how to put these studies together. Everything's a little bit different in how you go about it, but appreciate that, Ryan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carl, I wasn't sure. Did you have another something you wanted to add as well?
Oh, I just messaged to you. The question was, is it important for folks to duplicate their comments with the online tool, or are the comments in this meeting adequate?
I would say comments in this meeting are adequate. Just because you would duplicate a comment doesn't mean you get counted twice. So appreciate that, Carl.
Okay, thank you.
One last call for questions or comments for us for today. Well, oh, go ahead. So it's I think that's Art Tatchel's number, if I'm remembering things correctly. Go ahead, Art.
Yes. First of all, I would like to thank you and your staff. I think this tool has been awesome. Easy to read, easy to comment, and it's a good opportunity to get a lot of people on here and educate them about the process. So kudos to all of you people, and thank you very, very much.
Really appreciate that, Art. Thank you. Well, once again, everybody, I appreciate everybody's time and efforts joining us today. Appreciate all the staff on the call who stood by and were ready to answer questions that maybe those of us in headquarters couldn't answer. So appreciate everybody's time on the call today. Again, I invite folks to join us for the plenary session and into next week as we start to shape these fishery packages for next year. Appreciate everybody's thoughts and comments as we're trying to put these things together. These discussions aren't easy, but I applaud everybody's professionalism and demeanor and attitude in these discussions today. I know it can be hard as we're talking about you know, how to implement things kind of fairly and equitably. There's always winners and losers, but I really appreciate everybody's thoughts and time. So once again, thank you. We look forward to the next time we're together and appreciate everybody's time. Be safe and have a great day.